Sequels are deceptively hard to do right. After all, it's one thing to craft a new world and characters with the express purpose of telling a single story. But once that story is complete, well, it can be hard to know what to do with these characters and where to go in this world without it simply feeling like a retreading of old ground, or alternatively, so different that it feels entirely disconnected from the original. Sometimes sequels can even end up feeling like a betrayal if they take well-loved characters or ideas in too controversial of directions. Then there are those sequels that feel like nothing, just worthless events that never should have happened, a soulless attempt to cash in on a previous story's success. And Kronk's New Groove is probably the most egregious example of this I've ever seen. Now, it's not as though I expected this to be some amazing movie or anything. I went in with pretty low expectations. It is a direct-to-video type deal. But I wasn't prepared for how much I would hate this movie. It's not even that it's offensively bad because it takes risks and messes things up, or that it utterly betrays the original in terms of resetting its main characters or something like that. No, it's just soulless. In fact, if I were to make a template for how to purposefully make a soulless sequel, this would be it. So actually, yeah, why not? Let's do it. This is how to make a soulless sequel starring Kronk's New Groove. Kronk was one of my favorite parts of The Emperor's New Groove, and that is far from unique to me. So I should be down to clown with more Kronk, right? But this is a lot like when Cars 2 decided to shift focus to Mater and have him as the protagonist in that movie. Some characters are just better in small doses, and choosing to have Kronk as the titular character here was a massive mistake. See, Kronk was great because he was such an absurd, random character, a comedic force that popped up from time to time in the movie to both propel the plot forward and give us some of its most memorable gags. As the lead in his own movie, though, well, I got really sick of him really quick. The reason is simple enough. It's hard to get all that emotionally invested in any problems Kronk might have because he's so all over the place. Don't get me wrong, there are certain things tying the various elements of his personality together. For instance, when push comes to shove, he's a kind-hearted guy who's well-loved by just about everyone. But that does not a compelling protagonist make, at least not for a feature film. Actually, there's one moment that's a perfect encapsulation of how it feels to sit with him for a feature film. See, at this point, Kronk has received news that his dad, who he has a poor relationship with, is coming to visit him. He's panicked and upset, but then he gets distracted, and this is his reaction.
Where was I? Oh yeah.
If this were in the original movie, it might work well enough, since I'm not meant to take his struggles all that seriously. But when Kronk's relationship with his father is the heart of the conflict, well then I don't know if I want that part of the movie to get played up to the audience as something where Kronk can turn on and off his emotional response to it at a moment's notice. None of this is to say that I don't believe Kronk would do that, just the opposite. This seems in character for him. But it's a good reason to not have him and his struggles at the center of the movie. You're immediately working with someone who's going to be really hard to wrangle in while still keeping the core of his character and his appeal intact. One of the biggest issues is probably just that this movie is built around wanting to see Kronk change in some way, wanting him to become more confident and to build a better relationship with his father. But I don't really want to watch Kronk change. He's appealing as is. Giving him some sad backstory with his dad doesn't really add anything substantial to his appeal as far as I'm concerned. In fact, it kind of runs counter to his appeal, because now he's being treated as far more grounded and serious than I ever thought he had any right to be. In fact, I'd be willing to bet a large sum of money that some producer or higher up decided that they were going to focus on Kronk for one simple reason. He's one of the most memorable parts of the first movie. His name will get the kids to watch. And I'm sure it did, but it didn't lead to an enjoyable film. It led to a tired one that feels like it's bending over backward trying to justify a focus on this protagonist, and that struggles to build any sort of interesting narrative around him. Alright, I've been talking quite a bit about the story struggling to justify its focus on Kronk, so I should probably tell you what the story is. And fortunately, it's pretty simple. Basically, when Kronk receives a message that his father is coming to see him, he panics. Why? Because his father thinks that he has a wife, kids, and a house on a hill. All the things his father thinks a man needs to be successful in life. And Kronk is incredibly worried about disappointing his father. So we're obviously going to focus on Kronk attempting to find these things, right? Well, no, not really. Instead, the whole movie is framed around this conversation between Kronk and his coworker, as he explains how he once had a house and a woman, but he lost them. The house receives one flashback while the woman receives another, and we only come back to his father arriving right toward the end of the film and before Kronk has any time to come up with a serious plan. So all he does is ask Pacha to basically lend him his house, and a bunch of people pretend to be Kronk's wife. Kronk really doesn't take much of an active role here, or at least any active role he did take is entirely in the past. As such, this narrative has practically no forward momentum. It's entirely spent spinning its wheels. Where Pacha was the heart of the original movie, that ever-important element that kept things glued together regardless of all the absurdity, this movie has nothing like that for me to latch onto. Because, and I need to stress this, I don't care about Kronk's relationship with his dad. All we see of him before his arrival is one flashback scene of him disliking the fact that Kronk cooks for some reason. Yeah, we don't really explore why that's an issue for him, but it is, I guess. All the time we could have spent on building up that relationship into something I could get behind is instead used for these flashbacks. Really, it felt like there was no overall story to tell here. Instead, there were some ideas for silly situations for Kronk to find himself in, the type of thing that could work decently as a 20-minute episode of television, and they were simply slotted into a feature film framework. And that didn't work for me. The start of The Emperor's New Groove is great. We begin by watching this llama in extreme distress. Quickly a voiceover comes in and it's the llama, or rather the man who will turn into the llama. Through his words, we're promised that he was wronged and that we're going to see how other horrible people ruined his life. This scene works on multiple levels. First, it's just a pretty solid hook. Like the idea of someone being turned into a llama for some reason and a whole movie focused on that. Yeah, I'm down for that. It's at least a way to get my attention. On top of that, it encourages the audience to sympathize with Kuzco. After all, this horrible thing has happened to him, and that just makes it easier to be on his side of things, or to at least hope that he'll come out of this better. But then we get the film's first musical number, which is entirely built around helping us understand Kuzco's cruel, narcissistic personality. So then there was another reason for this jump forward to a sadder time for him. This is our promise that he will be punished for his actions. Additionally, his narration serves as a great way to characterize him. Even as it becomes increasingly obvious that he's totally in the wrong, he still pleads for attention. It's a great way to characterize this ego-driven guy, and structurally, it makes it feel like he spends the first chunk of the film yelling, "Me, me, me." All of this is built around hooking the audience and helping them understand the main conflict and characters of this story. To me, that's the purpose of this introductory section, and why it works so well. Now, let's look at the opening of Kronk's New Groove. Similarly, Kronk narrates about something bad that has happened to him in the future, and then we cut back to the past where we get a musical number that catches us up to speed on his personality and his misadventures in the last movie. Eventually, much like in the first film, Kuzco interrupts to give us a look at his personality. So, on the surface, it seems pretty similar to the original. Except it isn't. At all. Because where The Emperor's New Groove had a reason for all this movie really doesn't. First, Kuzco, why is he here? He isn't a major player in the story, and his fourth wall breaking is no longer about helping the audience understand his personality. No, instead, he's just explaining that this isn't his movie, like test audiences got confused and needed someone to explain why he's absent for the majority of its runtime. It's a bit odd. Meanwhile, where the song at the start of Emperor's New Groove gave us a major insight into Kuzco's unexpected personality, this song shows us nothing about Kronk that we don't already probably know or that isn't easy to glean from prior material. This cut forward also doesn't even work as a hook for the audience. How did this guy somehow turn into a llama? Is a much more interesting question than, how did this guy make a mess? In fact, if anything, this scene takes away what little momentum the movie might have, since unlike the first film, where we come back to this moment while there's still plenty of time to go before the end and we have an opportunity to wonder how things will turn out, in this one, we don't get that. By the time we get back to this moment, the movie is almost done, and almost all that's left is a brief moment where all the characters tell us what we already knew. They love Kronk. He's a nice guy. If these were the only ways the movie needlessly mimics the original, that would be bad enough. But oh boy, there's so much more. The movie is constantly referencing back to the previous one, and not in a way that's fun or charming. Instead, it's like this movie's run out of ideas or never had any in the first place. Admittedly, some of these individually could be cute callbacks, but added together, well, it gets rough. Let's just run through the list. The angel and devil appear to talk with Kronk, and the devil fellow makes fun of the angel's clothes again. The kids argue back and forth by saying the same thing over and over with increasing speed. There's a sequence in a different art style showing a plan that will never come to fruition. Kuzco interrupts the movie to draw on a desaturated background, though now he's just telling the audience something they already know instead of this being an important character moment. There's a chase scene involving Yzma with big band music. Squirrel gives plot-relevant information to Kronk. Ending song in a similar style to the one at the start. Pull the lever. It's all coming together. But I skipped one that I really want to stop to focus on. This here, where Yzma shows her leg to Kronk, and Kronk gets freaked out until he realizes that she's really trying to show him something different. This coin he wanted. Obviously, this is a reference back to this moment in the first film, but there's a key difference between these two. In this scene, the joke was that Kuzco and Pacha were so frightened by her showing off leg that, when she revealed her knife that she was about to attack them with, they were actually relieved. To me, that's the joke, the absurdity that you would be relieved. Here, though, well, she's got a coin to give Kronk, so okay. Now all the absurdity has been stripped away from this moment, and the only joke I can really pull from this is Yzma is ugly and you should laugh at her. It's not nearly as funny. As small as this moment on its own is, it's really telling as far as the overall film goes. This movie simply doesn't understand why these moments worked so well in the original and just grafts them onto a new story that has no need for them. Again, this just doesn't understand the appeal of the very movie it's supposed to be a sequel to. And that's what makes this movie feel so soulless. It's so transparently aping a far more interesting movie, and yet it fails to even ape it well. There's so little in the way of heart or conflict or characters to care about. It's just bland and boring, here purely to milk the first film for all it's worth and help the bottom line. It's truly one of the worst sequels I've ever seen, and maybe this video taught you something. Or maybe it didn't. I also just kind of wanted to complain about this movie because I saw it on Disney Plus, thought I'd watch it, and then I was a bit offended that I spent time watching it. So I wanted to make that worth my while somehow. Either way, thanks for watching this video. Hope you enjoyed it, and hope to see you next time.